Welcome to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze, bringing you all the entertainment news and movie reviews that a Jew can use. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan, joined by our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman.
Hello, good
Thank you so
morning.
much.
How
Good
are you?
morning for you and afternoon for me.
That's
Great
right.
to see you.
Yes, I just rolled out of bed, as you can see. For I know some of the listeners actually watch this on YouTube, and as we just about were to hit record, I said I do not really look professional. I look like I'm wearing clothes I just slept in, which may actually be the case. This is the one of the negatives of working from home is that you sometimes forget that you're going to be on camera and want to look a little professional. So I want to apologize to the viewers. I look what my mother would call a schlumpf.
It's your bed head, right? That's
It's
what we're talking about? It's the
not
hair.
the lack of hair. No, it's this shirt. I look like a schlumpf. I look
Yeah.
like a schlumpf. A schlump or a schlumpf? Which one is
You-
better?
I think you look amazing, and I love that color. It's my favorite color in the world. So
It's a
I
nice
think
color.
you're carrying it off gloriously. So
Okay.
don't worry, you look
Okay.
gorgeous.
For those not watching, it is a rich, deep purple. I look a little bit like Grimace, the McDonald's character, if you're familiar with
Oh,
Grimace.
okay. Now I will always think of that when I see you. But okay, erasing it for the moment.
Good.
Jordan, we have two films to discuss today. We have a long film called All the President's Men, which we very unintentionally scheduled for President's Day weekend week. I don't know if that's how you would call it, weekend week.
Yeah.
And then the other film is a short film with a long title, an
Yes.
Israeli film that is up for an Oscar, actually. But
Correct.
first, we have some sad entertainment news that you're going to bring us.
Yeah, well, sad, but also in a way life affirming. It's not too much of a surprise because we knew he was ill, but a very important Jewish filmmaker by the name of Frederick Wiseman passed away. We're recording this in my time Tuesday morning, so we got the news less than 12 hours ago. Um, Frederick Wiseman passed away at the age of 96. Now you might
So
be
soon?
yeah, exactly. So you might be thinking, but he was working, man. He was working until he was 94. I mean, his career is incredible. For those who are maybe thinking, I've never heard of this gentleman, let me give you a very quick synopsis of who he is, and then more importantly, direct you to where you can watch his 44 feature-length documentary films. Frederick Wiseman, as I said, 96. You could make the case that he is one of the most important uh, makers of documentary films anywhere. In fact, one of the short film we're going to talk about today has a little bit of the Wiseman touch, or at least it tries to. His first film was made in 1967, and his last film came out in 2023, 24. And in between, he made 44 altogether, and then did shorts and was a producer and even acted in a couple of movies. Um, he was a Jewish guy from Massachusetts, went to law school, and then had a degree in law. And the story goes that he had law students, and he brought them to a home for the mentally ill or the mentally unstable in Massachusetts, and was kind of horrified by the conditions there and decided I'm going to make a film about this. And he got everybody's permission that he needed to get. And he shot a film with a camera he had, very low budget. He had one of the newer sort of portable cameras, portable recording devices for audio. And then the state tried to ban the film, and it actually did get banned for decades. I just read a little stat that it was the only film ever banned in America, not for sort of pornographic reasons or anything like that. It was because there was this legal hubbub. But the way in which he made the film, which is how he made all of his films, which is no voiceover, no direct address like you see in most documentaries, 60-minute style, where they're commenting, no title cards, no nothing. It just starts and you're in it, and it drops you in, and it's up to you to figure out what's going on. And this was sort of the fly on the wall style, what they sometimes call cinema verite or direct cinema. And it could be a little disorienting at time because you don't know who anybody is. You don't know what the point of view of the film is either. And some of the Frederick Wiseman critics would say he doesn't do anything. He just turns the camera on. But of course, that's not true because it's all in the editing. It's very sly. And it's all in the what he's deciding to show. He would shoot for weeks and weeks and weeks and accrue hundreds of hours of material. And back in the day when cameras were noisy and allowed, just the camera being in the room would sort of affect the subjects. Anyhow, I mentioned that he made 44 films, and most of them were about um, institutions, high school, the welfare office, public housing, city hall. These are all kind of bureaucratic nightmare things that maybe you don't think you would be interested in watching, but the way he puts it all together is absolutely fascinating. And some of his movies are quite long. In fact, there's one that's 6 hours long. It's one I've never actually seen. It's called Near Death, and it's all set at a hospital in the ICU, and it's about doctors and families and clergymen and people kind of figuring out when is the time to say goodbye to somebody? What's the last step? At what point do you stop administering medical aid? And it sounds very depressing. So I haven't watched that one. And a lot of those movies are actually very depressing, but a lot of them are actually quite life affirming. One is called National Gallery, and it's all set at the National Gallery in London. And it's just like meetings. It's like figuring out how they put on a show. There's one set at the ballet in Paris, I think. There's another one, which I love, called Ex Libris, which is about the New York City Public Library and all of its branches. That one goes on forever. It's absolutely fascinating. And then the last one he did is a name that I'm going to mispronounce because it's French. It's called Menu Plaisir Les Trois Gras, which is basically, it's 4 hours long. It's exactly 4 hours long with no intermission. And it's all about a three-star Michelin restaurant in the French countryside. And like, if you ever wanted to know how cheese gets sorted and made and cut, and how they pick the snails and how they display the food, and it ends with just talking and eating and drinking wine, and it's absolutely fascinating. And I know you might. There's two others I want to point out that I love. They're more recent. One is called In Jackson Heights, which is Jackson Heights is a neighborhood in Queens, New York, where I used to live for many, many years. And Jackson Heights is considered to be the most ethnically diverse county on the planet. More languages are spoken in Jackson Heights, Queens than anywhere. And it's just hanging out in Jackson Heights, town meetings, the local library, the coffee shop, where they pick up the bicycles, just getting to know people that live there. And then he made another one soon thereafter called Monrovia, Indiana, which is old school, kind of very white, extremely white. In fact, I just read a note. The only person of color in the entire film is they have as a wedding. There's a black wedding singer, but it's just like very homogenous. Jackson Heights, of course, is very, very liberal and diverse. And Monrovia, Indiana, is a very right wing, and there's no political agenda to either film. He just plopped his camera down, observed what he saw, and cut it together. And you come to it and bring to it what you want. I mean, I saw Monrovia, Indiana, and the parts that I find most fascinating is a small town. So you're sitting in city hall meetings, so many meetings in his movies, and there's like an argument that goes on forever about a fire hydrant that doesn't work, and another one about they want to put a second bench on a street. And you would think, all right, yes or no? Do we put the bench? But it goes on and on and on, the second bench, and everybody's got an opinion about the second bench, which is just so funny about the microcosm. And then you can read into it and draw your own. You could turn this into a great philosophical story. It's almost Talmudic in a way. And I just read an article. A colleague of mine, a fellow by the name of Richard Brody, a guy that I love, his reading of Monrovia, Indiana, I thought was a little bit extreme. He sees it all as a great condemnation of Trump and all this. And I'm like, I just remember them talking about the bench and having a good time. Maybe I'm not that deep. I don't know. But he found something quite different in it, which is what I think Frederick Wiseman would really quite like. Anyhow, the good news is, and the other thing I should mention, the name of his production company is Zipporah Films. So, Zipporah is a Hebrew name, I believe.
Yep,
Uh,
Zipporah was the wife of, Moses, right? That was,
that
his wife.
Yeah, that sounds
Yep.
about right. Well, that's
Uh-huh.
interesting. I never put
Yep.
that together. I knew it was a Hebrew name, but so if it's named after the wife of Moses, I happen to know that Zipporah Films was the kind of who bankrolled this guy Wiseman for 50 plus years. He was very upfront. He said his wife was wealthy, and that's how he was able to
Ah,
have these
nice.
films. So there you go. Um, uh,
A question for you though, Jordan.
Again, where can I?
Other than no, not where, but other than the name, was his filmmaking informed by his Jewish, background at all?
Well, this is what's great about his work is, my reaction to Monrovia, Indiana versus Richard Brody's in the New Yorker. I mean, it's, what's the old joke? Ask two Jews a question and you'll get 3 answers, right? So there's a lot of you project what you want onto it, and there's a lot of discussion afterwards. What did that mean? What was the symbolism of this? Did it have any symbolism? I think the fact that his movies are very lengthy, or often very lengthy, not all of them. Some of them are, 80 minutes, but, he would the movie was as long as it needed to be, he would say. The You would get into the minutia of something, and it had almost like a Talmudic aspect to it. But no, he never did a film about a synagogue. He did a film about Madison Square Garden. For some, that's a synagogue, you know. So,
It's the temple, the holy
the
temple, right?
temple for some. Yeah, he did a film called The Garden. That was another one that was legally under wraps for many, many years. You could only watch it illegally, but now you can see it legally. Um, Anyhow, the good news is this: if you're listening to this podcast and you live in the USA, you likely have a library card from your taxes are paying for the library. And if you have a library card, and if you don't, you can get one so long as you pay your taxes. Most American library systems will grant you access to a streaming service called Canopy, Canopy with a K. And Canopy with a K is terrific. It's like smart person's Netflix. It's a streaming service like any other, and you type in your library card number, and you get X amount of streams per month. It's not unlimited, but you get like I think I get 12 a month or something, enough to keep you going. And all of Wiseman deliberately, because he was a man of the people and a mensch, and he loved the public and he loved libraries. He made a whole film about libraries. He said all of my movies are going to go on Canopy because it's basically free. You got to jump through hoops. You got to type in your card, but I'm not putting it on Netflix where it's going to get buried, or HBO Max or any of that crap. It's for Canopy, and it's great. It brings a tear to my eye. Actually, he was a truly righteous man, and I never met him, but I was in the room when he spoke a couple of times, and he was a smooth character, and he lived in Boston and in Paris, and he actually did act in a film called Other People's Lovers or something by the great French Jewish director Rebecca Zlotowski, whom I interviewed for Times of Israel once or twice, and she considered him like a grandfatherly figure. And he acts in one of her movies as like a I don't know, like a wise old neighbor or something. But he was a cool guy, and he died at 96. He left behind an amazing legacy. He transformed documentary films. No one did it quite like him beforehand, and no one quite had the magic touch like he did afterwards. And you can discover this for yourself. Some of them are a little dark and depressing. Oh, one of them is actually set in Israel. Did he say they're already Jew? One of them is called Sinai. Oh boy, what is it called? Because this might be the one that people might want to watch first. I have seen this film, Wiseman film Sinai, and this is real time Sinai Field Mission. And Sinai Field Mission is I'll read you the blurb. Follows the diplomats and technicians who operate the U.S. Sinai Field Mission to help the early warning system established in 1976 to help facilitate the disengagement between Egypt and Israel in the 1973 war. So Sinai Field Mission came out in 1978. It's 127 minutes, not too long by his standards. And it's you're hanging out with the guys listening for Michigas on the border. So that you're with the Americans, but it's set in that region. So there you go.
So, after the break, we're going to discuss an Israeli documentary that maybe, who knows, was indeed informed by this late great filmmaker.
ביחד. מההתחלה.
בשם השף נעשה ונצליח.
אתם הטבחים חושבים שאתם מחזיקים את העולם בביצים. זה לא טוב לך מה שאתה עושה. מה אתה יודע מה טוב לי, מה לא טוב לי? סרוויס! לא יוצאת לי מהראש. שקרן. מה את רוצה ממני? חי.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. So it's Oscar season, and you and I have been watching a couple of films that are from Israel that are up for grabs in this Oscar race.
Yes.
And the one that we watched this week was called Children No More, colon, and then you'll fill in the blank.
Yeah,
And
it's a long title and it doesn't flow. But then when you see the film, you see why it's called this. It's called Children No More: Were and Are Gone, and it is nominated for Best Documentary Short. And then the one we discussed last week was nominated for Best Short Subject, non-animation live action. And it's pretty rare that two Israeli films get nominated for an Oscar, but both the subject matter, you can kind. I think it might be a good idea for us to discuss the film as a film first, and then we can discuss its politics second, as a second chapter.
great idea. But let's just remind our listeners of last week's film title, The Butcher's Stain. And that was a fictionalized short film. But this one that we watched this week was a documentary. And Jordan, why don't you set it up actually?
Yeah, it's a very straightforward, almost simple documentary. It just is about a group of protesters in Israel, mostly in Tel Aviv, who are vehemently against the war, but more specifically felt compelled to remind passersby about the death toll in Gaza, specifically on children. And what this group would do, and perhaps even still does, is they go in the Rabin Square and they go to where there are other protests and they have a little section and they do a silent vigil, which is very smart because that means they don't have to have a permit. Because as is discussed in one moment, when a cop says, "Where's your permit?" and the woman says, "We don't need a permit. It's a silent vigil." And they hold photos of children that have died, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, there's you just see the faces and you see the age, and there's a little bit of information, and they just stand there, and their goal is just to build awareness and to make people think about what's happening, as if anybody in Israel is not thinking about what's happening. And that's basically it. And it's a very simple film. It's about a half hour, and it's just about them preparing their signs, going to a place, and standing there with the candles and the photos. And then there's no commentary from the film itself. Like, there is no title cards, much like Frederick Wiseman, like we discussed in the last a moment ago. You don't have too many explanations of things. And you don't have any discussions about context, about, why is there even a war in the first place, until they go somewhere, like they go to the beach in Tel Aviv. And uh, understandably so, it doesn't take long until there are some hecklers. And some of the hecklers, I think the film did a pretty good job of, at first, some of the hecklers are vulgar, and it gets a little heated, and the sort of the organizers, I think, don't talk back, just be silent, no violence, just do your thing. And some of the hecklers are a little crude, and then some of the hecklers I thought made pretty good points, actually, where it showed how great a democratic society can be, that you can have a conversation. I mean, some people are like, "Hey, we're on the beach, man. This is our, we're trying to relax on the beach, and you're showing these signs of dead children. This is, what are you doing?" And then some are like, "Look, the obvious retort is like, where are your signs for the hostages? Why aren't you blaming Hamas?" I mean, the things that you would expect. And the movie does get into a little bit. So at first, when I saw this, I thought that the movie was very simple and maybe even a little bit pointless. And then it kind of lingered with me a little bit. I thought like the first half, I'm like, well, they're just, we don't know anything about the people who are doing it. You don't really know their names. You don't know their background. But then you kind of, as you're watching, it's mostly women. It's predominantly women, not exclusively, but mostly. Like, you get to see them and they're talking and they're setting up their signs, and because you don't know anything about them, your brain starts to work in other ways, and you're looking at what she's wearing and what her jewelry is, and you see, for example, an Israeli woman speaking Hebrew with Arabic on a necklace, and you're like, well, that's an interesting person. You start to think about, like, well, who is this woman? Like, what does she do? Well, where does she live? And it just suddenly this is what great voyeuristic cinema does, is it kind of affects you in ways that aren't like reading an article where you're learning facts. So you don't really know anything about the interiority of these people, but you do get to see them and spend a half hour with them. Um,
I
And
think it's really interesting hearing you describe the film because, of course, you're coming at it from an American point of view,
yeah,
and those who will be judging for the Oscars don't necessarily live here,
no,
or definitely don't live here even. And I think for me, and I did watch this one with my husband, it was a hard watch, of course. And the whole time I was reminded of a project that we've done here at the Times of Israel called Those We Have Lost, which has memorialized the 1,200 who were slain on October 7th and several of the soldiers who fell in battle afterwards, because it's the same impetus to make sure that these people who were killed in the name of violence, in the name of evil that Hamas started on October 7th, that they be memorialized. Of course, there's no, it comes as no surprise that the filmmakers are far left
yeah,
activists and they make no, they're not hiding their agenda, I would say, in this
yeah,
film at all. It is 100% sympathetic to this organization, which is extremely fringe. I mean, you have to understand that extremely fringe in terms of Israeli society. And as you said, it's not as if nobody says that lives don't matter, and obviously children's lives matter, they're precious angels, every single one of them. But the timing of it and the context in this nexus of loss, deep loss, that was not at all discussed really by the people in the organization, right? They said here and there, it's not either or.
yeah,
We want to bring the Palestinians to the forefront for these people who are
yeah.
thinking of them at all. But at the same time, several of the passersby, I didn't note anyone saying, "Hey, this is the beach, let us relax." I heard
That,
people on the beach saying, "What about my friend who died in battle in Gaza because of
yes,
Hamas?"
yeah.
And that's the piece that was, for the first, it's like 36 minutes, I think, this film,
Mm,
and the first 20 of it just overlooked that whole
yeah.
context.
But by design. I mean, I think that's where the film I think was quite clever because at first you're just like in this group mindset of like we're on a mission. It's not that many people either. It's 40 tops, 35, something like that. It's we're on this mission, we're doing this thing, we believe we're doing the right thing. And then when they go out into the world, they get a little feedback. And there is a little bit of comment. Like at one point, some woman says it's not. There's a little bit of an argument, and it gets a little heated. And somebody says, of course we mourn our countrymen as well, but and from their point of view, and it's a point of view I can understand. It's who's standing up for these dead Gazan children, and the answer is they are these people, and I do think it's interesting though. I think perhaps an American watching this or someone who's not Israeli might think that this fringe movement is bigger than it is, and maybe that's
Right.
part of the design. Which is not to say that there's no Israeli, I don't think, except for a couple of lunatics who are happy with the fact that Gazan children are dying. I don't think that's the case, despite what you might read about
I
bloodthirsty
think it's
Zionists.
probably
Yeah.
the same amount of people who are, sticking up for the Palestinian children are the same amount of people who would rather they would be killed. Okay.
Right, right.
It's not to say that aren't these people, because obviously there are these people. There are, extremists on both sides.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
and that's what is completely missing from this film
Yeah.
as well. But you want to hear something wild?
Yes.
Okay, so as you mentioned, there are like 30, 40 people in these groups.
Mhm.
So during the watching this, Israel is such a small country. First of all, one of our Times of Israel reporters is on the screen for about a second,
Oh,
Noam
that's fine.
Lehman.
Yeah.
Yeah, very funny. And then secondly, one of the women who is interviewed later in the film, I was like, wait a minute, isn't that author that I interviewed once when my car caught on fire when I was on the way to interview her? Crazy. So it's just such a small country. And
Yeah.
of course, these voices, they're the same people always in the same group,
Sure.
in the same location in Tel Aviv,
Yeah.
at the same kind of protests against the government and against, the prime minister specifically. So I think all of that has to be taken into
Yeah,
account.
it's a very interesting. I mean, they feel compelled to do this, and part of it is like, well, this is what makes Israel great, and also what makes America often great is that you can do this. if you wanted to protest what was going on in Gaza as a Gazan, good luck, or in Iran. Look at the protests in Iran right now. Unfortunately, look at the protests in Minneapolis right now. That's not so good either. I mean, there are things. I mean, one thing I was thinking about, you know, maybe this is, so this was a silent vigil, right? And there are a lot of pro-Palestinian marches in New York City, where I lived for many, 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 many years. And I can tell you, those sure aren't silent. Boy, are those guys noisy, banging on things, screaming and yelling, shouting at the synagogue. They should take a page out of the Israeli book. So that was something that I thought of. I mean, I do think then, why has this film been nominated? And last week, The Butcher's Stain, which I thought was a good short film, but it was not a miracle. The answer is you have a lot of people who are very upset, very angry at Israel. It's sort of the default position now in liberal spaces, like in Hollywood, and there's not a lot of thought to it. And I think this is an easy way for a lot of people in Hollywood to say, "Oh, I'm against Israel, but it's still an Israeli movie. It shows the good Israelis, So let's celebrate this movie and give it a nomination." You do have a lot of Jewish people in Hollywood. This is not a secret. All the Jewish studios at one point, with the exception of Disney, were created by Jews, and you still have that legacy. So you have a lot of, Jewish people who are conflicted and upset. I mean, I'm conflicted and upset. I think everybody's conflicted and upset about this war.
Exactly, and that's the thing that made me kind of angry about this film because they were so not conflicted. They were very, just
Yeah.
their way or the highway, as it
Well,
were.
because they had a very small mission. Their small mission was, I want to honor and note. I want to honor and note the death of an innocent child, and that was it. They were like a one issue voter, and I could understand that. I don't know that I would stand on the beach in Tel Aviv for either side. I don't like to. I've been to a few protests in my day, and I always felt like a bozo afterwards. But I do understand. Like, I could see why they would do this. Like, no, I'm not. And it's a silent vigil. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going. All I want to do is, there was a child, a little kid was killed. It's a horror, and we have to note that. I don't think that's, they're not breaking windows. I don't think that's, anything that anybody should be too upset about, honestly. But I do think that the movie, like you said, it makes it perhaps seem a little bit not what the vibe is over there. But like I say, it has been nominated for the Oscar, and I think, it might even win. Who knows? But I think, there are reasons why it happened. I mean, there are a lot of films about this topic. And the fact that this one is the one that made it, it's suspicious a little, but I don't think it's suspicious, but it's notable that it is something that is of the extreme left, but also it's still Israeli. So you can kind of ride both sides of the fence there, because I will tell you that the extreme leftists who dominate the spaces in New York, where I lived for many, many years and still have an allegiance to, in a way, they will never watch this film. They hate this film because this film was made by Israelis. And what they would say, and one of the hecklers says this to the protesters, what they would say to the makers of this film is like, "You think you're helping? No, the way to help is to pack your bags and move to Brooklyn, move to Poland, get the hell out of Israel, or jump in the ocean and drown." That's what some of them would really, really like. There is nothing an Israeli can do that would appease some of the extreme left. And this film will never be watched by them because it has Israeli money in it. And if it were to win the Oscar, there are some, and I have some names. I don't want to highlight them. I don't want to give them any more gasoline. But some of these extreme left-wing people in New York that have a big following would condemn this film if it wins an Oscar because it's Israeli propaganda somehow. And I think if you were to tell that to some of these protesters, though, here's where it gets interesting. If you tell that to one of these protesters, they would say, "I don't care. All I'm here to do is, I have a picture of a kid who was killed, and I cannot sleep at night unless I stand on the beach and show that picture." And to which I say, okay, that's fair.
Yeah, and one of the
The-
people in the film who was highlighted, it was a pair of young men who were shouting out from an overpass bridge, and
yeah,
they
yeah.
shouted down to the crowd, and they said something along the lines of, Of course you're right. You're right, but you're not living in reality.
Yes.
So you need to live in reality." So yeah, definitely there were memorable moments. Though I would have to say, like, in terms of me being an editor, I thought it was so incredibly slow the first 20 minutes
So
when
it's
the
weird.
only action came, like,
The end, yeah.
yeah.
Because you don't know. Well, here's something funny. Because we just talked about the great Frederick Wiseman. He could have made a 4-hour movie about this, and it would have been fascinating because he knew he would shoot. He was like a great sculptor. He would shoot hundreds of hours and then cut it into something great. They don't have the juice in this. They're also. I
No.
think it was a very quick production. I feel like they were with this group for 3 days. It was not thorough, and it was. It's very surface. And at first, you're just like watching them make signs. That's really it. You don't know who they are, and they're just sort of talking surface wise. You don't know if you had seen them going home and being with their family as they're making this. There are just so many ways to make it more interesting, but they didn't have the time, they didn't have the money, or they just didn't have the juice to
Or
make a
maybe
good
the
film.
desire. They don't want these people to have families and have their own children. They want these people, and honestly, it's quite possible that most of these people don't have families and children because they were predominantly probably in their mid-20s.
They were all mostly very young women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So in any case, I thought as an editor, I would
Yeah.
definitely give it an oi. This was not good editing, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
And the film as a whole, definitely thought-provoking. I mean, you
Yeah,
and I have discussed it for about half an hour now.
Yeah.
But nuanced, it is not.
No, it's the meh middle grade for me. But I mean, certainly there are. I mean, the scenes that work, scenes are not even scenes. The moments, the instances that work are the point of this film and this vigil is when they just show close up of a kid. And you're like, oh, look at that adorable kid, and got killed in a bomb. And then you say, are we allowed to swear on the Reel Schmooze? You're allowed to say those fucking monsters in Hamas. Look what they did. Look what they started, and what the hell? And no, and it drives you a little bit crazy that so much of the world doesn't see it that way. But that's what makes us unique, I guess. So everybody can cancel us for that. All right,
So
good.
a bit of a oi from me in terms of editing, a meh in terms of content, and you're giving a full-on meh for
Yeah, I think
the
it's a man
cinema.
in the middle. I mean, it's first of all, it's relatively short. It's thought provoking. I wouldn't race out to see this, but if you're someone who likes to watch all the Oscar nominated films, it's not. It's worth your time.
Yeah.
And it's bundled in with all the other ones.
Exactly. And we cut a lot of lemons and pickled them while we were watching it, so it's okay. All right, let's go to a short break.
While Israeli reservists were serving, the financial reality at home began to change. Salaries were reduced or lost, businesses were forced to pause, expenses continued to pile up. That's why Latet has created a dedicated relief fund for families of reservists facing financial hardship because of the war. Over the next 6 months, Latet will provide monthly food and hygiene assistance to help families regain stability and return to everyday life. These families stood for all of us. Now it's our time to stand with them. Donate today.
And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. So the full-length feature that we watched this week, it was my first time watching it. I had never seen it. It's called All the President's Men. I believe it came out in 1976, so I would have been 1 year old when it came out.
Yeah.
And the story is the Nixon-Watergate scandal. And here's the funny thing. I was talking with one of my sons about it, and I was like, Watergate. And from that, all the scandals are now called Qatargate and all this. And he's like, what's Watergate? So it's kind of interesting learning American history through this 1976 film. But I thought it was, it's slow because it's from 1976. And I have to admit, there might have been a 20-minute snooze along the way. But I really enjoyed it overall. I mean, my husband checked out within 5 minutes. He's like, this is so slow. There's nothing going on here. And it didn't have subtitles in Hebrew. So he was like, I'm out of here.
Okay,
But
I'll give.
fair enough. Yeah. But I thought it was really entertaining. It definitely had the whole adventure aspect with the deep throat and, lots of suspense. And I liked the framing of it. I thought it was like full on a nicely done film, as if the film needs that 50 years later from Amanda from the Times of Israel. But it held up well, I thought.
Yeah, well, the reason why I selected it in the first place is because it's just about to have its 50th anniversary. And then, here in the U.S., the newspaper, the Washington Post, just kind of imploded. And this is all set at the Washington Post. So I had this movie in mind, and I rewatched it for an article I wrote for another lesser outlet. And then I've seen this movie several times, and I always think of Robert Redford. I mean, he's the lead actor, plays Bob Woodward, and he was also the producer of the film. So I just kind of think of his face, and Robert Redford is not a particularly Jewish face. I mean, I don't think of him as a Jewish guy, but pretty much everybody else in the film and in real life was Jewish. Robert Redford plays Bob Woodward, and of course his sidekick was Carl Bernstein, and he's Jewish in real life. He's still alive. And he's played by Dustin Hoffman. That's very cool with the long hair, and he's kind of
That's your cousin, right?
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dustin Hoffman is in it. The director of the film, Alan J. Pakula, is Jewish. The writer, the screenwriter, because it's based on the book that Woodward and Bernstein wrote, William Goldman is Jewish. And then a lot of the other characters in the film, like, the other editors. Harry Rosenfeld is played by Jack Warden. Howard Simons is played by Martin Balsam. Those two actors are Jewish, and I would imagine Harry Rosenfeld is Jewish also. And even Catherine Graham, who's not in the movie, you would know it from her last name, but she's Jewish. She was the owner of the Washington Post. Her father was Jewish, anyhow. So the movie, I think, is just, I've seen it several times, and I find it to be just absolutely fascinating as someone who works very tangentially in journalism. I mean, I write about movies and stuff, but there have been times in my career where I've had a little bit of a scoop, or I've had like a story that involved editors. It's happened a few times where I've had to like get the quote and the confirmation and the whatnot. And, I'm on to something that's going to get somebody in trouble, so it's got to go up the line. It's happened a few times. And it's thrilling to be even remotely involved. Now, what these guys did, they were very young. They were both under 30. It was a nothing story. There was a break-in at the convention, the Democratic National Headquarters, some bunch of bumbling schmoes, and everybody thought it was just they were mostly Cuban guys, so people figured, oh, these were angry Cuban nationals who, wanted Nixon to be reelected, and they just went in there to cause some trouble. And it was a nothing story on the Metro desk, which at the paper like the Washington Post was the lowest rung of the news section. But they followed the money, as they say in the movie, follow the money, and they realized that the Watergate break-in, it was not about the break-in, it was about years of dirty tricks that Nixon and his gang were doing. And they in the film you'll see, and he's sort of a footnote now, but Edward Muskie, so a name that very few people know, he was originally thought was going to be the challenger, not George McGovern in 1972. But they pretty much foiled Muskie's campaign with dirty tricks, with lies and innuendos and fake letters to an editor of a newspaper in New Hampshire that snowballed. And it was all these guys, because they didn't want Muskie. They weren't sure they could beat Muskie. They knew they could beat McGovern. So they kicked Muskie out, and they caused that trouble. And that's serious business, So it's just amazing to watch. That's not what the movie's about. The movie's not about Nixon. Nixon's not in it except for on TV in one or two moments. The movie's about how two guys track down a story in a pre-internet world on the telephone with books and papers flying everywhere, going to the library, going through library cards for that shot where the camera goes up and up and up at the Library of Congress with that music, the sort of ominous music by David Shire. It's so good. And just walking around knocking on doors, and then knocking a second time and a third time until the person has a story that they want to tell, but they're too scared to tell. They finally tell you. They get it on the record. You got to get the confirmation. You sometimes screw it up. You get yelled at by your editor. Everybody's wearing ties. It's terrific. It's a really,
And
really great.
smoking
Oh my
everywhere.
God. Smoking
And
and wearing ties.
yeah,
Yeah.
and the women are just gorgeous in their
Yeah.
well put together outfits. It's
Yeah.
just fantastic.
And
Yeah.
the women in the newsroom, they are there, but they're not treated equally. They're not in any of the meetings. It's only men in the meetings, and almost only white men. There's one black guy in one scene in one meeting, and he doesn't even talk. But it's mostly older white men. The women are in there, and they are deployed by Carl Bernstein to use their feminine wiles to get stories. It's like, hey, why don't you go out with him again? He's like, no, as the ex-boyfriend. Yeah, but he knows he can tell us. and they twist the arm and weaponize women to get the story, which is a little bit maybe not so righteous, but it's how it was in 1972, and it's how they got the story. It's kind of amazing.
The
A-
other
a-
thing that occurred to me, you were talking about, going through all these library cards and things of that nature, and I couldn't help but think about the Epstein files, the massive dump of gazillion million of pages of these documents that people, at really robust news outlets, they have teams of people going page by page by page over these documents. And so, I mean, journalism hasn't really changed in any way, though I'd have to say people are probably a lot less polite and then people at least on this film,
yeah,
they would phone up and they'd be like, "Oh, yes, can I please speak with the minister of whatever?" And they're like, "Please hold."
yeah,
And then they put him through. It's like, "What? In what
yeah.
world is that happening?" But
No, 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 no.
awesome.
The way the way they use the phone and phone books, like they have at one point, they know that somebody with the last name Dahlberg from somewhere in the state of Wyoming wrote a check, and they need to track it down. And sorry, Minnesota, not Wyoming. And it's Woodward and Bernstein. We got to get our facts right. So what does he do? He grabs the phone book and he starts calling everyone until he can find the right guy. It's really amazing. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the Epstein files. Going through it is it's the same but different. Different technology. There's no email on this. There's no cell phones. They when they want to talk to somebody, they got to get on a plane and go down to Florida and talk to some sheriff down there, Ned Beatty, in one scene. It's really amazing stuff. But you're right. It is kind of this. It's the same but different today. But also access. It's funny because access was more difficult then because you did not have computers. But then once you called somebody on the phone, they had to pick up and they put you through. Whereas
Right.
now, if you call a number, you're getting voicemail and you hit 0 6 times and you never get through to anybody. And that's just when you're trying to get a dentist appointment, and let alone trying to talk to the undersecretary of blah, blah, blah. So
I
it's a
mean,
different
then
world in that
and
regard.
now it's all about personal connections because
Yes.
you could see in the film that Bernstein's working, with this FBI guy that he knew. And
Mhm.
and that's basically how journalism still works. It's all
Yeah,
about the personal connections. And
it
so
is.
it doesn't matter how many emails you send off or how many
Right.
phone calls you make. If you here in Israel, it works more like this. If your son is in the same class as this person's son, then you can talk to his father, and then you could
Mhm.
talk to the father will connect you with his boss, who might be the minister of whatever.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's how things work, and I
That's how
think
things
that's
work. I
how
mean,
yep.
that's how you get a job. I never got a job through applying for a job. I got a job. How did I meet you? Do you know how I met you in
Through our mutual
2014?
friend.
Through our
Yay.
mutual friend, Harry.
Yay. Hey,
Times of Israel
Harry.
was starting. I don't know if Harry listens to the show or not. I hope he does.
He
It
should.
He should. In 2014, when Times of Israel was founded in 2014, right?
12.
2012. Okay, so in 2012, so that's how long we've known each other. Um, i- he was very proud of you, and Harry he's an American born Israeli, and he sent me a note. He's like, hey, maybe you could do some movie writing from New York City for this new website. And I'm like, website, new website. Who? I got enough websites, but all right. And then that was it. That was 2012. So that's it. I didn't apply for a job, and
Just
had you
did it.
yeah, had you put out a notice, we are looking for applicants to be a New York City culture writer for this thing, you would have gotten 100 applications, and I never would have, so that's the way it works, unfortunately, in life. And that's how it works in journalism, which is worrying because now the kids today, all they know is from the apps and the texting, and there's no person. I'll tell you a funny story about the apps and the texting. Social media, right? So as everyone knows, that I talk about all the time, I recently moved from New York City to Central New Jersey, and there was somebody I knew in quotes from social media who had a lot of interests that I have, and I discovered that they live in a town not far from me, and I sent this person a direct message over Blue Sky, which is the new X, which is the old Twitter and blah blah blah, and I'm like, hey, we've been chatting for a decade. I don't know your name. I only know you by your wacky handle, rock and roll lover 46. I don't know anything about you because I don't even know what you look like because your picture is of somebody else. but I know that you kind of live where I do. We should hang out sometime. And it was like, I thought I knew this guy. I've been making jokes with him for a decade. We're always zinging each other online. I don't even know his name or what he looks like, so I'm going to meet him at some point. And, it's sort of a weird thing. So that's not how Woodward and Bernstein would have operated. They would have known, they would have gone out to lunch. They would have, wined and dined. You got to get off your ass and into the world if you want to succeed in life is what I'm saying. So if your kid's home listening to this podcast, tell them to stop listening and get out there in the world.
Beat the humans.
Yeah.
But another thing that occurred to me, obviously, because as you said, Washington Post is in the news. They just laid off, I think, 30% of their staff.
Yeah.
And, just looking at the film, you look at this just one particular floor, the Metro desk floor, and there's just dozens and dozens and dozens of writers, and they worked as teams. And it's just such a different world now in journalism.
Yeah.
Who has the money, the budget to hire so much staff? And it's just a completely different game. So I love this film. I think mostly because of the fashion. I just love looking at the people and the clothes and stuff. But also the story is great. But, thirdly, and not less importantly, it really captures an era of great American journalism.
Oh,
So
for sure. Yeah.
for me, if we're going to grade it, it was definitely obviously, it's a not bad.
It's a not bad. It's a real not bad for me also. You're right. I mean, and the Post at the time had the budget to let two reporters follow a hunch for months.
For weeks.
And
Yeah.
do months, do
Weeks
nothing
until
else.
they weeks until they've improved that it was a story.
Yeah. Weren't doing other things. Didn't have to write list features or just did it as incredible. Now the other thing that's interesting from a political point of view is you look at the Watergate scandal and you think, oh, pish posh, like today, like of course they had a dirty tricks team. Of course you look at our political scene right now, you compare the crimes of Nixon to Mr. Trump, and it's like, I know there are some listeners who are fond of Mr. Trump, but I mean, just on the face of it, guilty or not, the man has been convicted of more than one crime, Donald Trump. He is a convicted felon, and he has been found guilty in a civic trial of sexual, it's not rape. He was not convicted of rape in the civil trial, of sexual misconduct, sexual bad, something bad, something, I forget what it is. The guy to think that is the president now, when back then the president had to resign because they never got Nixon red-handed. It was his underlings. It was Ehrlichman and Haldeman and all those guys. They were conspiring to do this, and Nixon was aware of the cover-up. That's what most people will agree, even those who are Nixon apologists. He was aware of the cover-up. That was enough to get him resigned. Now, Mr. Trump, if his guys were found, he would be thrilled. Look at my guys over there breaking into the good. Go break it. Use a bigger hammer next time. That's what Trump will be saying. It's just interesting to think about how American politics has changed in 50 years and where will it go? I mean, Trump's not going to last forever. He keeps eating those Big Macs. Eventually Trump will be gone.
No, I think it's the preservatives from the Big Mac
It's
that
the
keep
Big
him.
Macs that are keeping him alive. It is true. It's not a joke. You can Google, does Trump really eat Big Macs all the time? And the answer is yes, he really does. He really, really does. So eventually Trump will leave. What's going to happen next? Are we going to continue in this trajectory, or are things going to mellow out once he's gone? We're going to find
there's
out.
the pendulum theory, blah, 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 blah.
I know. I'm looking forward to the pendulum. I really am.
Okay, Jordan, this is the time of the week in which we decide what we're going to watch next week.
Right.
And my dad, my number one fan, perhaps only, but my dad had a great suggestion. What was it called? Blue Moon?
Oh yeah, Blue Moon. Okay, okay, so here's the thing. We are getting closer and closer to the Oscars. Every week the Oscars get closer. So I thought it could make sense for us to at some point cover all of the movies that have a Jewish connection to the Oscars. So I'm going to give you dealer's choice for next week. Here are the two options. And if we don't do it next week, we'll do it the week after. So it's just, which one do you want to do first? One is a more enjoyable narrative film, Blue Moon.
That one.
And okay. So Blue Moon, just to let you know, is a movie starring Ethan Hawke, who is not Jewish, directed by one of my favorite directors of all time, Rick Linklater, who is also not Jewish. He's from Texas. And we're going to talk about him next week. Blue Moon is about Larry Hart, who was the great lyricist. And this movie is, I just want to, just a little bit of warning, and that's it. It is by design a filmed play. It could be a play on the stage, but that's the way they shot it. And they go to different rooms, and when it was all set in a restaurant in real time.
Does it have
And
music in it?
yeah, I mean, yes,
Great.
because
So we're on. Okay.
there's a
What's the
pianist.
other one? Yeah.
There's a pianist there, and they play music. And and so we're watching it. The Jewish connection is it's about Lawrence Hart, who was Jewish, and Ethan Hawke is great in it. Okay, the following week we're going to watch a movie that has no real Jewish subject matter, but the two directors are Jewish. It's a movie called The Alabama Solution, and it is nominated for Best feature-length documentary. And the two directors, one is named Kaufman and the other is named Jarecki, and they are Jewish. And I said, oh, there you go. So we're going to cover this now.
Sounds good.
The movie is very, very, very depressing. It is about the prison system in the U.S., and I'm very curious for you to watch it because I want to know. Not that you're an expert, or I mean, you're an expert on everything, but I don't know if you are. I don't know that you're specifically an expert on the prison system in Israel, but you certainly know more than I do. I'd be very curious to know the differences about the U.S. prison system and the prison system in Israel, and specifically in Alabama. And it's some bad news. It's pretty rough. And that movie was a movie that when it was done, I had to go take 2 aspirin. It was very upsetting. So we'll save that for the week after next. That's been nominated for Best Feature-Length Documentary. And Blue Moon, which we're going to discuss next week, has been nominated for 2 awards. Ethan Hawke as the lead actor. He might win. I don't know. He's up against Timothy Chalamet, who we love from Marty Supreme.
Ooh, okay.
And then the other, and some other guys too who might win. We'll talk about it next week. And then also this was nominated for Best Original Screenplay. And the writer's name is somebody I will remember by next week. And that's Blue Moon for next week. And then the week after that, The Alabama Solution. Alabama Solution is available to those who watch HBO Max. So if you are an HBO Max subscriber, you have 2 weeks to watch it. Blue Moon is elsewhere. You might have to pay $4 to rent it on Amazon or Apple, but I say it's worth it. I think it's very good. Amanda's dad liked it. We'll see if Amanda liked it next week.
Sounds good. It's a date, Jordan. Thank you so much for joining me this week.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze. Please check out our episode next week. This installment was produced by Ari Schlacht. If you have any comments or questions about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until next week, shalom.